The French have a phrase, joie de vivre, the joy of living. At Alliance Francaise in Washington, D.C., that spirit is right here in your city. Language classes, cultural events, a community that makes French feel like home. And this summer, kids can dive into French immersion camps with weekly themes and field trips. And when you become a member, you save on all of it. Classes, camps, and events all year long. So discover your joie de vivre at francedc.org. That's francedc.org.
Today on CityCast DC, it's the 35th anniversary of the protests that rocked DC's Mount Pleasant neighborhood after the 1991 police shooting of El Salvadoran immigrant Daniel Gomez. Ellie, Walton, and Quique Aviles, creators of the documentary Manplesa and Uprising Remembered, are here to explain what happened and why they think it was a turning point for DC's Central American communities. The documentary is showing for free at Lamont Plaza in Mount Pleasant this Friday, May 8th. Today is Tuesday, May 5th. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. And before we get into today's show, remember, we are in the middle of our membership campaign, and we need your support as we continue to expand our newsroom. You can become a member at membership.citycast.fm, and there are a lot of you. I'm going to read out all the names after the interview, but we are seeing dozens of new members coming in, which means that there are so many of you who do want to support our work as we expand to add more original reporting. I've been around DC media a long time. I've run 2 newsrooms in the city. CityCast is committed to being an indispensable source of local news for you. It's not cheap, though, so we need your support to continue growing. Join for $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. Be like Sarah H., who said, "I look forward to your podcast every morning. Thank you for showing up to give me local news that I care about." No, thank you, Sarah. And you all can be like Sarah by joining at membership.citycast.fm. Hey, Ellie. Hey, Quique.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. So a lot of Washingtonians don't know about the protests that took place following this police shooting on Mount Pleasant Street in 1991. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I was 9 years old. I grew up about a block away from where it happened. And basically, Daniel Gomez was at Don Juan's restaurant. And then there was a fight that kind of spilled into the street, and the cops were called. And then he was shot. And that led to kind of 3 nights of uprising.
This is an Eyewitness News special report.
In the district's Adams, Morgan, and Mount Pleasant neighborhoods this evening, a curfew went into effect at 7 o'clock.
There have been plenty of police on the streets all day here in Mount Pleasant. And right now, just down this hill, there are 200 more officers standing by just in case.
So I remember, walking up right after he was shot. He was taken away in the ambulance, and pretty quickly a crowd gathered.
Attention. This is a Metropolitan Police. Under authority of Title 24 of the District of Columbia Municipal Regulations, a curfew has been declared in this area.
Even though I was 9, I'll never forget that moment of just seeing the frustration on people's faces, the anger. But I think it was beyond that. It was really the sense of enough is enough. We've had it, as Quique says in the film. And that just kind of sparked, the community coming together to rise up against this kind of, police brutality that they've been experiencing on the streets for a decade.
You use this word uprising, not riot, not protests. Why is that?
Well, I think, it's all relative. No, I call it linguistic gymnastics. What we do. It was a riot, and some people have a problem with using that word. But it was also an uprising in the sense that we were new to the city. We came in droves from Central America because of the civil wars that were taking place all over Central America, and many of them funded by the United States and the Soviet Union. That was that Cold War game thing. So, we grew up, I think a lot of us, with this sense of oppression. And then when we came here, the police force, the DC police, because the city had never experienced such a drove of brown people coming into the city. And at that time, 1980, when we came, the city was still 70% black. Then, there was this whole the issues of police, continuously harassing these newcomers, right? And in 1991, that was 11 years later after our arrival, and people were sick and tired. So I think that was the spark. So the uprising is this thing of saying, hey, look, we serve you, we work here, we live here now, deal with it.
This is talked about a lot as a sort of turning point for the community. I was a senior in high school. I remember I was going to a party associated with our graduation that was right around then, and there was tear gas in the air. But so to understand it as like a turning point, can we talk about what it was like right before it turned, the conditions that led people to feel so dissatisfied? Can you sort of place us? What was Mount Pleasant like before it?
So as Quique just mentioned, the U.S.-backed war in El Salvador led to thousands of refugees from El Salvador arriving into D.C., and a lot of them arrived into Mount Pleasant, and the city was not set up to serve them. So even though they were dropping bombs and causing this exodus, they weren't prepared to take care of the people that were running away from that war. And so the housing conditions were pretty dismal in the sense of like overcrowding and not really supporting the families that were coming. And I think late 80s is when a lot of white folks started coming into the neighborhood. There were also a shift in terms of the policing, in terms of the phone calls because of, noise on the street. And I think that there was a shift in terms of the dynamic between how the police and the community were like their exchange. And so I think there was a boiling and boiling as, young people, a lot of folks from the Latin American Youth Center, which was, right on the corner. It was like 16th and Irving and Columbia. So there's a hub of young people, and young people, would hang out on the street. And I think that there was just, week after week, so many incidents of young people being dumped when they were just hanging out. And on top of that, I will say too, I think there was this sense of community and folks coming to Mount Pleasant and creating a sense of home as well. And we wanted to also honor that piece of the story and that piece of the neighborhood that I grew up in, that I loved, that, there's a lot of ways that people were really looking out for one another.
If you're not using Today Tix to plan your next night out, what are you waiting for? Today Tix has deals on all the hottest events at your favorite venues in the DMV, like Arena Stage, Signature Theater, Shakespeare Theater Company, and more. All tickets are verified, and with exclusive discounts and last-minute rush tickets, you'll find deals you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you'll earn rewards like ticket protection and Tix Cash just for using the app. You can even set an alert for events that aren't available yet, so you're ready to book tickets to the best events, like Pippin at the Signature Theater or Othello at the Shakespeare Theater Company the second they go live. Visit todaytix.com/CityCastDC or download the app to impress all of your friends by being the first to know about what's happening in your city.
Those hot DC summer days are coming, and when they do, your AC is going to be running nonstop, and your utility bills are going to show it. But don't wait for the heat to hit. The pros at Window Nation can help you replace your old, drafty windows with custom-built, energy-efficient ones at prices you'll love. Right now, Window Nation's Buy 4, Get 4 free sale is going on. That means you could replace every window in your house and get half of them free. Plus, 0 down and no payments or interest for 2 full years. Plus, Window Nation offers a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. The sale ends soon. Schedule your free consultation today at windownation.com.
I'm curious, we'll come back to like 1991, but just to explain, DC historically has never been a place that had it was not like a melting pot city like the northern cities that had lots of immigrants. It's not close to the border. And, DC's understanding of diversity up to that point was like, well, we got white folks and we got black folks. Why did the Salvadorans who were coming to the United States and wanted to get away from civil war, why did they come to Washington? And then within Washington, why, of all the neighborhoods, Mount Pleasant?
Well, I think word of mouth was, somebody had a cousin, like my mother had been here since 69. My brother and my sister were already here. I was part of the revolutionary movement as a student, as a high school student. So I fled because they had me on the list, the death squad. So
they were saying, he's a Marxist, he's no good, we got to get him.
Oh, no, the terrorists, enemies of the nation, we were called all kinds of things, no? But the repression was so brutal. I mean, it was just like the smell of death was around the air. I mean, you see bodies and heads and, they would leave corpses, with their thumbs tied up to their backs with signs that said, this is what happens to terrorists. I mean, it was just like this sense of fear, no? So coming to DC Columbia Road was kind of like the hub. That's where the Latino stores were, the historic Latino stores that had opened since the 60s and 70s. So you were drawn to where, number one, you will find people that spoke Spanish, no? You were trying to get oriented, and that's where you went, no?
I want you to walk me here from 1991. There were those 3 days, 3 nights of sometimes violent disturbance, anger, fury, that eventually died down. What happened next? Like, what was the effect of all this on the district?
There was a civil rights task force. I mean, we made it to the front page. I mean, we were a national story, no, on TV. So for the first time, the spotlight is on us, and this was a chance to say to the city, "What's up?" So the mayor sat down with all these leaders. A blueprint was conceived through a lot of community meetings. More funding came through for the community agencies that were dealing with teaching people, how to speak English. Women, that were pregnant. I mean, all the things that human beings need, no?
And there was some simple stuff like hire some dang cops who speak Spanish.
Right. But that was a double-edged sword, because they went and hired Puerto Rican cops from New Jersey and Puerto Rico and brought them here. And these dudes, they looked down on us. So we were like, to hell with you. I mean, now the police, the DC police force has a lot of Salvadorian Americans, I mean, at that time, there was one Salvadorian woman that was captain, Maria Alvarenga, and she was involved in the whole negotiations and stuff. But most people said, a violent statement has been made. And we were also forced to, in a way, relive what we had lived in El Salvador, tear gas, bullets, seeing the cops with the batons and the riot gear. I mean, and then the helicopters so I think internally, for those of us that had experienced all that, violence from the military and the police forces in Central America, it was kind of like we rekindled that something. And there were moments, I think, when we felt that we thought we were done with this, and here we are.
One of the ironies in watching your guys' movie is, this is the shooting, its aftermath, the various promises of inclusion that are made after that are portrayed as accurately, I think, as sort of a key turning point for a community. But it's also, the bittersweet part is these neighborhoods along Columbia Road, Adams Morgan and Mount Pleasant, are now very, very expensive neighborhoods where, people immigrating to Washington can't afford to live. And I don't think they're geographically the epicenter of the Latino population in the DC area. I'm curious if you guys still live there.
No, I can't afford to live there. I can't. And it's a wild thing. You grow up in a neighborhood and then you kind of come back and try to start a family where you grew up, and there's no chance. Like, I live in PG County, and But I will say, though, that for a lot of the Salvadoran community, like the stores are still there, even though a lot of the people have been kicked out. A lot of the bodegas are still there. There's a lot of restaurants that are still there. Heidi's is still there. Don Juan's is still there. So, I think there is this sadness of being kicked out. And also, I think there is this continued sense of like resilience and resistance and claiming. And, there are still, the Latino Economic Development Community, which was one of the organizations that was started right after the uprising. They are in those buildings fighting for tenants to buy buildings. So they've been able to purchase a couple of those buildings in Mount Pleasant. And so the fight is still on, and I think the film is as much, trying to reveal the injustice, but also to celebrate the way that we're still coming together and we're still fighting.
So I think one of the things that we're trying to do with these films is to try to incorporate some of this stuff into the curriculum, because there's no sense of the Latino history. There's not one sentence in the DC history book that is mandatory to graduate from high school here in Washington, D.C. There's not a mention of us. So I think part of what we're trying to do by making these films and having these audiences is saying there's more to us than what you might think.
Hey, Bridget Todd here, one of the hosts of CityCast DC. We're in the middle of our spring membership campaign where we ask you, our listeners, to support this show and the newsroom that we're building in this city by becoming a CityCast DC neighbor. Trust me when I say that being a neighbor comes with great perks like ad-free listening, weekly bonus content just for members, and invites to exclusive events. So all that stuff is great, but even more than that, member support is the financial fuel that we need to keep showing up for our city. And here's a little taste of why your actual neighbors support this show. Matt H. says, reliable local journalism is essential for developing community and holding people in power accountable. Matt, that is the truth. Jake H. says, I love the local approach to journalism and understanding that news in this city is more than just what happens between the Hill and the White House. You said it, Jake H. And Katie K says, I'm a small business owner in DC who wants to support other local initiatives, and CityCast is one of the best ways to stay plugged into what's going on in my city. Thank you, Katie K. So to join these fine folks in becoming a CityCast DC neighbor, head to membership.citycast.fm/CityCastDC. It's only $10 a month or $100 for the year. And if you join this week, you get a super cute tote. I have it. I love it. I can confirm it is a great tote. That's membership.citycast.fm/CityCastDC. Thanks so much. We deeply appreciate y'all.
Hey, when you guys have taken this film around, I'm curious about the reaction, because you've said a lot of people don't know about it, and I'm curious as to why that is.
That's a deep question. So, when we were coming up on the 30th anniversary of the uprising, and I remember walking down the street in Mount Pleasant, and I was talking to somebody, in line to get a really fancy cup of coffee, and one person didn't know about it. Another person looked at me and said, oh, that was just a bump in the road of this neighborhood. Like, it didn't matter. It was a black cop. He was drunk. I think there's been ways that sometimes these incidents get kind of tucked under. They get individualized. They get, there's excuses made for why they're not connected to the larger history of police brutality and systemic violence. And I think that's part of it. And, when we've gone to schools, we've gone to colleges, we've shown this film almost every year on the anniversary at the intersection where he was shot. And I think the response has been, a lot of people, kind of seeing themselves in it, like a lot of Salvadorans, next generation folks who, grew up here. Their parents came here. Their parents may have been on the street that day, but that story wasn't passed down. And feeling that sense of like, oh, that's me. And I need to now go talk to my parents about what happened. And then a lot of folks coming to the neighborhood who are just thankful for knowing the history that's like they walk every day. But as Quique said, you know, part of the intention of the film is also to get it into the schools and get it into the history books because, you know, the film not only is set in 91, but it also goes back to 1980 to the bombs that were dropped in El Salvador, and then fast forwards to 2020 and during the George Floyd protests here. So it's all about making those connections to the larger history so that, you know, this incident that people have tried to tuck away gets reconnected to this larger kind of movement.
And I'd just like to add to that is just that I think we've touched a nerve. A lot of new, like, they call themselves Salvis, Americanized, born here, Salvadorian Americans whose parents never told them about the realities of the war. There was an instance where this young woman that I met in an art store, Salvadorian, that went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, an artist, because I went to Duke too. And she managed to bring her mom to see the film. And when her mom saw it, she finally was able to begin to lift up her blouse to show her the scars because she had been tortured. So she had negated all of that out of a sense, I think, of not passing on the trauma. But a lot of that has been the reaction to this film. And people wow, I heard about this, but it's connected to me and to my mom or to my dad or to my uncle or, and so forth and so on and so forth. So there's a whole new generation of Salvadorian Americans that are now in college. And I've noticed that, everywhere I've gone, and there we are. I think the film touches on many different things. It's a piece of history, and I think a lot of the new people that have come into the city don't realize that they're walking on the sidewalks that still speak, of the past.
Quique, Ellie, thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And before we go, we've got a ton of new members to shout out. I'm going to need to take a bunch of breaths in the middle of this list. Thank you so much, Nicole M., Alex B., Caitlin C., Ricky O., Sarah H.R., Jessica S., Bonnie U., Philippa H., Laurel R., Julie A., Matthew W., Lucy N., Allison V., Meredith B., Meredith N., Ashley B., CJ C., Hahua H., Jackie P., Nancy Q., Greta M., David L., Brianna R., Tori C., Sarah H., Sharon W., and Geraldine O. Thank you all so much. Again, if you want to become a member, go to membership.citycast.fm. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.